Now, that I'm going to do what's called a denouement. And it's a French word that means the final explanation. And I said to someone, one of the guys here early, he said, "What are you doing today?" I said, "I'm doing the denouement." And he said, "What?" And I said, "What?" I said, "Well, if you look at the Bible, Revelation is the denouement of the Bible. It's the final explanation, and I'm going to do this for Ruth." Now, Ruth, we've finished the actual 4 chapters, but one of the amazing things about this is that there's so much depth to it, it just is mind-boggling when you spend time in it. And it is also a metaphor for you and I, because Boaz is a prefiguring of Jesus, right? Naomi is a prefiguring of Israel, and Ruth the Moabitess is the prefiguring of the church. And we're going to go through various things, and this will make it clear, well, I hope it will make it clear. And this is something that I watched probably 20 years ago on K-House with Chuck Missler doing this. And so we've got the permission to do this to show you some of these screenshots that make it clear. So in chapter 4, that was the big climax there. Boaz confronts the nearer kinsman. And the nearer kinsman, he's not named there, but a lot of commentators on this inferred that the nearest kinsman not named is the Mosaic law with the 613 commandments. And he is willing to redeem the property. When Boaz said to him, "Will you, as the nearest kin to Naomi, will you redeem the land that she has sold?" And he said, "Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem, because it's Elimelech's property, got no problem with that." And in the very next verse, Boaz says, "And if you redeem the land, you must also redeem the Moabitess Ruth as a bride." And he cannot do that, so he yields his shoe to relieve the obligation. Now, that is a sign, and it was done in front of all of the witnesses at the gate of Bethlehem, especially in front of the minyan of the elders, the 10 elders there. And he yields his shoe and passes it to Boaz. Now, what that means is that the land that would have been, because one of the things you have to understand in Hebraisms, if he said to Boaz outside in front of witnesses, "I will redeem the land," by the way, it would have automatically transferred to him. Do you see what I mean? The very fact that he said that he will redeem the land for Naomi, it became his property. Otherwise, the third thing there wouldn't make any sense. So he has to take off his shoe, which was the ownership of that land, Elimelech's land, and he had redeemed it to Naomi. In order to fulfill the law of redemption, he has to take off his shoe, which is the title deed of the land, and pass it to Boaz. It's a very strange performance, but it's exactly what's in the Bible. And in the Old Testament, this is all the way through. And remember when last week I said in Genesis 17, Jesus said to Abraham, "Go north, south, east, and west, and all of the land that you walk on, I will give to you and your descendants." So it's the walking on the land, and the contact between the shoe and the land gives it the title deed to that, and it's just amazing. So Boaz steps up as the second in line as the redeemer for Naomi. and he purchased the land for Naomi, and he purchased Ruth as a bride. Okay, so we're going to go in the first few verses just as a reminder of what we've got to, and it's Ruth chapter 4, verses 4 to 10. And this is Boaz, starting in verse 4. And I thought to inform you, this is the nearest kin saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, then redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me that I may know. For there is no one but you to redeem it. So there is only ever in the law of redemption the first person, the nearest kin. There can't be a double act there. It has to be one person. So this is what Boaz is emphasising. For there is no one but you to redeem it, comma, and I am next after you. And he, this is the unnamed nearest kin, says, I will redeem it. And Boaz then, in verse 5, just throws water all over the guy. Then Boaz says, on the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy, this is a shocking translation. They've got from there in the Hebrew, and it's clumsy. You must also buy, it should be from Naomi, Ruth the Moabitess. Why do I say that? I am so pedantic about getting everything right, because when Ruth married Mahlon, she became subordinate to Naomi, who was now the head of the house because her husband had died. So you have to buy from Naomi, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance. And as an offshoot during the week, I'm doing a study about the Book of Life and the Lamb's Book of Life and all the rest of it. And if someone has no son to follow them, their name is actually blotted out of the Book of Life, sorry. And in verse 6, and the close relative, this guy said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. And remember, the inheritance I explained last week was his own children and his property and his assets. And so by saying that, lest I ruin my own inheritance, because the inferences in that phrase is that he has not yet had a son, a firstborn son, to take over from him when he dies. Do you see what I mean? He cannot do this for Naomi, lest I ruin my own inheritance. And you redeem, he's now talking to Boaz, you redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. And verse 7, now this was the custom in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. If you want to have a good read about that, it's Deuteronomy 25. That's when Moses is on the hill above the plain of Moab, and the Israelites are all ready to go across the Jordan into Canaan. And this is part of his restating the law in a form that is legal. And so now this was the custom in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm anything, one man took off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was a confirmation in Israel. And verse 8, therefore the close relative said to Boaz, buy it, and that's in italics and it shouldn't be in there. The translator should have made it clear. Buy the land and the wife for yourself. And so he took off his sandal. And 9, and Boaz said to the elders and all of the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's from the hand of Naomi. And verse 10, moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren and from his position at the gate. That is his status in the city as a councillor, as a city councillor, we would call them, at the gate. And you are witnesses this day. And so that's the whole kit and caboodle in this particular little book, 4-chapter book. And it's absolutely staggering. As I said, Boaz, Jesus, Naomi, Israel, and Ruth the Moabitess as the church, because the church is mainly Gentile. There's a tiny little portion that are Messianic Jewish, but it's by and large Gentile, and that's why it's called that. Now, screenshot 2, please. And this is give me a break. They're all folded. Right, this is Ruth's social progression. This is what Chuck made. Chuck Missler put that title in it. I disagree. I think this is Ruth's spiritual progression, and I'll show you why in a couple of things later. So in 2:10, she is back in the land in Ephratah, outside of Bethlehem. She's a Nokriah. She's a total foreigner. And that's in chapter 2, verse 10. And then when she goes down into the land and starts gleaning for Naomi, and everyone's looking a bit sort of weird at her. Where did you come from? What's a Moabitess doing in our city? Why are you a daughter of Naomi? And so she is a Shepah at this time. And she's beneath a lower servant. That would be the lowest Jewish servant in those lands, gleaning the harvest. And that's in 2:13. Now, we get to 3:9. This is when she lies at the feet of Boaz, and when he wakes up and she's at the feet of Boaz, and this is a normal thing, and she says to him, I am your maidservant, spread your skirt. That is the hem. We did that in quite intensive study a couple of weeks ago. The hem is the authority and the power and the identity of the man who wears that cloak. And so she was saying, put your power and authority over me and take me to wife. So she then progresses to be a ma, which is a lot better than any of the servants in the fields. And we get to chapter 4, it's in both 10 and 13, as she becomes an Isha, a wife of Boaz. And that's, when you say a social progression, that misses the whole point. She goes from a total pagan person from Moab, and she becomes the wife of the progenitor of David and Jesus in the lineage of the Messiah of Israel. And so that's how important these things are. And you've got to be very, very careful to understand it. Sue and I were watching something on the TV last week about prophecy. And it was absolutely disgusting, because they were saying so many pastors in America and in the Western Hemisphere are saying we do not need the Old Testament anymore. Well, that's like taking those legs off the piano and Stewie has to be on his knees banging away every Sunday morning. Do you understand? It's just absolutely ridiculous. You don't understand the New Testament unless you understand the Old Testament. And so This shot shows Chuck's social progress, which is his opinion. But, and by the way, I'm not scared of any commentators, all right? If I agree with them, I'll agree with them. If I don't agree with them, I'll explain why I don't agree with them. And this shot shows Chuck's social progress, which is okay, but I take it deeper because I see the spiritual progress of Ruth from despised Moabite to a saved, redeemed believer wife of the man who is in the direct lineage of Jesus. And Ruth 2:10 says this, "So she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, 'Why have I found favour in your eyes that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?'" See, I am a Moabitess. I should be the lowest of the low. And verse 13, "Then she said, 'Let me find favour in your sight, for you have comforted me and have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservants.'" She's actually putting herself below the lowest strata of the Jewish people in the field of the harvest. And Ruth, verse 9, this is when she was at his feet, and he woke up with a start in the night, and he said, "Who are you?" And so she answered, said, "I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative." That's why, because she is Naomi's daughter through marriage, and so she's a relative to Boaz. And can we have screenshot 3, please? This is the Hebraic name of Ruth. And you read it this way, the opposite to the English there. So you've got Resh, Tet, and He, which is the R. The first one is the R, do you see that? And then you see the Tet, that's the T. The dot in between the He and the Tet is the vowel, which is the U. And vowels are either in that place or underneath the letters. And so that's what I get really annoyed about this. I get a lot annoyed about people making changes to things that should be obvious to you and I. Because if we have to chase it down, you have to get people who are good about this. So that's her Hebrew name in the Masoretic script. And so this is her name in the first 3 chapters, in which I contend that she is growing spiritually, and the name spelt in this screenshot is the modern Masoretic script. I somewhat suspect that after the 1st century passed and many Jews became believers in Jesus, they deliberately, having called himself as the Aleph and the Tav, the Alpha and Omega, the first and the last and the beginning and the end, they tossed out Paleo letters and changed it to a more obscure script. Can I have the screenshot 4, please? That's it there. Oh, I've got to keep up with these. All right, so that is the Paleo description of Jesus. That's the Aleph and the Tav. The Aleph looks like a what? The head of a bull or an ox. And if you're a sharp reader of the Bible, when we were in Revelation chapter 4, there were 4 cherubim standing before the throne of God, was there not? And the first cherub had the face of what? A lion, the lion of the tribe of Judah. The second cherub had a face of an ox, the servant of God. The lion of the tribe of Judah, the servant of God. The oxen pulls all of the stuff in the paddock to to sow and to rip it up. So that's the head of the alphabet, and it also enumerates power, authority, and singleness. And there's the Tav. What does the Tav look like? A cross. What does it sound like? A cross. And you know, in ancient times, they could make a cross just by putting one stick on the other and form a tav. Do you see what I mean? Because it was a marker in ancient Israel that if someone ever saw a tav somewhere, they had to stop and wonder why. Now, this is how deep this screenshot is. There's the ox, Jesus, the Aleph, and he's all power and authority. But at the end of his ministry on the earth, he was nailed to a what? To a tav. To a tav. Do you see what I mean? So when he started his mission on earth in the first advent as the virgin birth of Mary, and he was all power and authority, and where did he end his mission? Until he ascended on a tav, on a stick, on a cross. That's how deep it is. I love it. And so these are the paleo letters of the Aleph and the tav is emblemed as a cross, but even more than that, in its most reduced form, it is like two sticks upon one another. And if you remember that I have told you that the eternal name of God is Jehovah from the German, but in the Hebrew, it is Yod He Vav He, behold the hand, behold the nail. And I actually listened to a Messianic Jewish lady on YouTube during the week, and she actually said that. And so that's his eternal name. Everyone goes, if you say to a Jewish person, if you try and mention Yod He Vav He, it's like, oh, you don't do that. You say Hashem, just the name. They don't like going that close because they don't want to misuse it and bring trouble upon themselves. So the ox head, Jesus, the head of our house, the church with all power and authority, was crucified for us on what? On two sticks, which is what? And it's the cross on Golgotha. And screenshot number 5, have we got? Oh yeah. That's the Masoretic translation of the Paleo into Masoretic. Now look what they've done. The Aleph, the ox head is gone, and the cross has gone. Do you understand that? And that's what I said just before. Because so many Jewish people were getting saved after the ascension and the missions of the disciples, so many people were coming to faith all around the Eastern Roman Empire. Later on, they came together, the people who didn't believe in this, and they brought out the Masoretic script. And have a look at that. What I take from this is that long diagonal is the horns, there's the head and the chin, and that is supposed to be a cross. I don't get the cross on that. And I am convinced that they do that deliberately to remove the pictorial truth of who the Messiah is. And if you see the ox head and the tav, the cross, then you'll understand exactly who it was. And so screenshot number 6. Now this is in chapter 1. And if you have a look at that number 4 there, the next line down is her Hebrew name in Masoretic. See Ruth on the very left-hand side? That's her name in the first 3 chapters. There is only the Resh, Tet, the Vel, and the Che. And what happens later, it's just amazing. Screenshot 6, please. So all the way through the first 3 chapters, that was her name. Now look what happens to her name, when she becomes the wife of Boaz in chapter 4. Can you see Ruth there? So what's in front of her name? It's the Aleph and the Tav, right? That's Jesus. And now she is in the line of Jesus. Do you understand the genealogy of Jesus? And if you have a look at everything, and Aleph and the Tav is also a Hebraic token of a covenant. And so I dug out through that. And the first mention of covenant in the Old Testament is Genesis 6:18, where Jesus is speaking to Noah, and he says, I'm going to punish the people of the earth, but I'm going to make a covenant with you. And so there is an aleph and a tav in that word covenant in Genesis 6:18. Then you go after the flood, you go to Genesis 9:9, and Jesus is talking to Noah about the covenant that he's going to make with him, that the earth will never be flooded again. And right in front of the word covenant is the aleph and the tav. And when Lachlan was preaching, do you remember he gave you the 6 aspects of the memra, and that's Jesus. And what was the 6th one? The 6th one is Jesus is God's covenant signer. Do you understand? Every time there is a covenant made in the Bible, there's an aleph and a tav beside the word covenant. Why? Because Jesus signs the covenants on behalf of God. There's 8 covenants in the Bible. We might do that one day, but I'm hoping it would be up there, not down here. So that is what happens to Ruth now, and she's in the lineage of Jesus. She now has an aleph and a tav before her name, and it's there in verse 10 and in verse 13. And all of these things, you know, I just love doing these things. I just do not give up on trying to find out the absolutely amazing things that we've been doing over the last 7 years. And I've had some lovely emails from people around the world who've said, you're the only one that seems to be really heavy on the Old Testament, because if you don't understand the Old Testament, then we're not going to understand what's going on in the New Testament. And so we're on these screenshots now, and this is the sequence that I did with Chuck Missler 25 years ago. So can I have our coming king, the one please? Yeah, that's it. And he actually attributed it to the guy that did this one, and this was Pastor Lockridge. And that's why I was so blown away at the worship today. Every single song that we sang praise to this morning was all about Jesus. Jesus was at the very centre of every worship song. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. Oh, there must be some sort of psychic, telephone line between the worship team and me, and I'm not aware of it, but it always turns up. See, this is our coming king. Who's waiting for him? Who's waiting breathlessly for him? I am. I mean, I'm still okay, physically okay, but I just want to go up. This world is getting so perverse. Someone was telling me, Anne was telling me that they passed a law in England that Apple must pass over to the English government every text that ever turns up on an iPhone. They want to know what you're saying to someone else on your phone to their phone. I mean, this is how sick it's getting. And I certainly don't know who Trump is yet, whether he's on the right or he's Nalevo on the left. If you're Russian, you'll know that. To be on the left in Russia is not a good thing. So, but he's doing some amazing things. But he's trying to do some things good in America, and the Democrats are just trying to slow it all down. but this is our coming king, and just beware of this. He is the King of the Jews, right? We've lost maybe 20, 25 people from this church over the last 2 years since I focus on Israel and I focus on the Jewish people because they're the foundation of our faith. And when October 7 came and we got the church to stand behind a giant Israeli flag, and the kids all held little ones on sticks, about 25 of our congregation said, "Oh, you're pro-Israel and you're pro-this." And so they never came back. And I'm pleased because I don't want people like that in the congregation. Because if you don't like Jews, you're not going to like Jesus. And if you actually get to the Bema seat, Jesus might not like you. Do you understand? It's a quid pro quo. So he's King of the Jews. That's ethnicity. And that is proven there in Matthew chapter 1. He does all of it way down from David downwards. And he's King of Israel. He's King of all the ages. He's the King of heaven, the King of glory, the King of kings, and the Lord of lords. And this is what Pastor Lockridge wanted to say to his congregation that day. There's a lot of people, my congregation, that I have met over more than 3 decades of Christians that I've met, and I've met some really good Christians. But unfortunately in churches, there's a lot of people who know a lot about Jesus. Do you understand? But they don't know Jesus. They know facts, figures, times, theories, theologies, but they don't know him. And boy, he did me over some time ago. And from out of that, I really got to know him. And I didn't like myself for quite some time after this, and I'm still coming to terms with me. But do you know him? Do you really, really, really know the real biblical Jesus? And so he is, the next one, boys, please. He's the prophet before Moses. And by the way, when the Sanhedrin came down to John the Baptist on the plain of Jordan when he was doing all of that baptizing in the Jordan River at Bethbara, one of the questions they asked him in the second stage of interrogation was, "Are you the prophet of Deuteronomy 18? And he said, "No, I am not." So the prophet of Deuteronomy 18 is the one that everyone in Jewish theology at the moment is waiting for the prophet to come, because the prophet is supposed to introduce the Messiah to the nation of Israel. And Jesus is the prophet before Moses and a priest after Melchizedek. Melchizedek, you remember I told you what the name meant, my king of righteousness. A champion like Joshua, because for 8 years he won every battle when they went into Canaan, subdued the land and established a presence in Canaan. An offering in place of Isaac, that's Genesis 22, when Abraham took Isaac up there and was about to sacrifice him. He knew well from his relationship with Jesus that if he killed Isaac, then he had to resurrect him, because he had promised through Isaac descendants without number. And boy, I don't have that faith. I can't lie my son down on a slab of stone and try and put a knife through his heart. But he wasn't prophesied to come straight back to life again in 3 days. So it's called the Akedah. It's Genesis 22. He's a king from the line of David. He's a wise counselor above Solomon, a beloved, rejected, exalted son like Joseph, and yet he's far, far, far more. The heavens declare his glory. Have you ever been out in the desert on a moonless night? How many of you have been out there and looked up at the cosmos? When I was out there first 30 years ago doing grassroots exploration, I was staggered. If I moved away from the fire on a moonless night underneath the Milky Way, I could read a West Australian under the amount of light that throws down, because there's no pollution out there. You can't do it in the city. And I was just staggered. And I looked up at the Milky Way, and I can understand why David said that the heavens are the handiwork of God. And it's so true. And the firmament shows his handiwork. He who is, who was, and who always will be, the first and the last, he's the Alpha and the Omega, he's the Aleph and the Tav, as we looked at, and the A and the Z. He is the first fruits of them that slept, so that he was the first to be resurrected in a glorious body. And don't come back to me again with Elijah and the other one. It's rubbish. He is the I am that I am, the voice of the burning bush. Do you remember that? Poor old Moses was wandering along a path in the wilderness, and all of a sudden he saw an acacia bush burning, but it wasn't being consumed. So he turned aside and he went up to look at it, and a voice came out of the burning bush, and that was Jesus telling Moses that he's got a job waiting for him back in Egypt. And if you read Exodus 3 and half of 4, Moses spent all of that time trying to not get the job. It's a brilliant little passage there. I don't want the job. Yes, you're going to go. I don't want the job. They'll kill me. No, I don't want to go. For 1.5 chapters, he just tries to get out of it. He's the captain of the Lord's host. That's Joshua chapter 5. Just outside Jericho, Joshua was wondering around how they were going to bring down the walls of Jericho. And in chapter 5, he met a strange person at night time with a sword. And he said, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" And do you know what the person said? "Take off your shoes, you are on hallowed ground." So who was it? It was Jesus. The same thing he said to Moses at the burning bush. He was the conqueror of Jericho, because he's told them to send the priests around 7 times and the walls fell down. He is enduringly strong. He is entirely sincere. And look at every one of these attributes. He's strong, he's sincere, he's eternally steadfast, he is immortally graceful, he is imperially powerful, and he is impartially merciful. That's everything that was sung by our praise team. All of those attributes, I actually singled them out when they were singing, and they had no idea that I was going to do this and highlight that. In him, that's in Jesus, dwells the fullness of the Godhead bodily. He is the same as the Father and the Holy Spirit. All of the attributes are spread between the 3 persons of the Godhead. And he is the very God of the very God. He is our kinsman redeemer. He is our avenger of blood. He is our city of refuge, and I'll teach you that later on in the year, should we be here. Our performing high priest, our personal prophet, our reigning king. A couple of these things I would have not yet. He is the loftiest idea in literature, and I mean all of the literature ever put together in all societies. Jesus is the loftiest idea. He's the highest personality in philosophy. He is the fundamental doctrine of theology. Any other kind of theology that leaves Jesus out of it and the Bible out of it is false doctrine. So he is the fundamental doctrine of theology. He's the supreme problem in high criticism. Do you know what? In the 1850s, a group of so-called intellectuals formed a group called the Committee of the Higher Criticism, and they started picking at the King James, picking at the Bishop's Bible, picking at the Geneva Bible, and these people was under a guy called Tischendorf, and they've created all sorts of problems in modern Christianity because there are far too many pastors being drawn away from biblical truth by these guys and their theories. So he's the supreme, Jesus is the supreme problem in higher criticism. He's the miracle of the ages, the superlative of everything good. Oh, amen. We're not here because, we are here because of this. And we are the beneficiaries of a love letter, and it was written in blood on a wooden cross erected in Judea 2,000 years ago. It was written in blood on a tav, a wooden cross, erected in Judea 2,000 years ago. He was crucified on a cross of wood, yet he made the hill on which it stood. Whenever you read that, do you just take a step back and say, you can't really get a grip on how unbelievable Jesus is? He created the earth knowing that there was a little mountain in the middle of Judea called Mount Zion, and he was going to be nailed to a cross on that at a point in time. He was crucified on a cross of wood, yet he made the hill on which it stood. By him were all things made that were made, and without him was not anything made that was made, and that's Colossians 1:15 and 16. What held him to that cross? It wasn't the nails. And this really, when I was doing this during the week, at any time he could have declared, nah, I'm out of here. But what held him to the cross? And it's not us. It's not us. It's not us. It's every single one of you. Do you understand? If every other person in the world was a sinner and you weren't, he would have died for you. Do you understand? That's how incredible Jesus is. It was his love for you and me. And we go through trials and difficult times in this life, but he still has conquered the grave, and he has cleansed us of our sin by his shed blood, and goodness me, I can't sometimes get my head around it. He was born of a woman, the next one, thanks boys. He was born of a woman so that we could be born of God. Do you know that you're all children of God? Any children of God here? 50%, that's very good. So he humbled himself so that we could be lifted up. He became a servant so that we could be made co-heirs. That's Romans 8. We are co-heirs with Jesus in all things that God will give him. And I can't get my head around that we're co-equal heirs with Jesus. I can't believe it. It's the church. The Old Testament saints, tribulational saints, millennial saints don't get that privilege. He suffered rejection so that we could become his friends. He denied himself so that we could freely receive all things. He gave himself so that he could bless us in every way. The next one, he's available to the tempted. That's one who is, sort of on the seesaw of belief, and the tried, the genuine Christian. He blesses the young, he cleanses the lepers, he defends the feeble, he delivers the captives, he discharges the debtors, and he forgives the sinners. He franchises the meek. And the word meek there is not being a little scaredy bubby, right? That's not the meaning of meek in the Greek, because Jesus is teaching his disciples to be his servants after he's gone. And he said, blessed are the meek. And so meek in Greek is a very specific word, because when the Greeks were looking for a Calvary under Alexander, they scoured all of the four sections of the empire, and they were looking for 7,000 horses to form the cavalry, but they had to be of a specific setting, constitution, emotional constitution. They had to be calm in battle, they had to know their rider, they had to know when to move and when to stay still. And the whole point of the meek in Greek is those who are able to be trained. That's what meek means. And I've always asked every congregation when I've told you that, are you able, and not even more than that, are you willing to be trained? Or are you gonna do it your way? Do you know what I mean? Jesus wants you to do it his way, not our way. And he guards the besieged. He heals the sick. Look, Sue and I, on Friday, went over and spent an hour with Henny. And, we were just shaking our head because the previous Sunday, he and I, in a quiet little conversation, were planning his funeral. You've got to go there and you've got to talk these things. You've got to ask people who are in palliative care, what would you like to do afterwards? Because I've done more funerals than I've ever wanted to do. I don't want to do them. But I said, you have to do this because you can't leave it to Charmaine, you can't leave it to the kids and all the rest of it. You have to do it. And so I said to Henny on Friday, I said, you know what I was expecting to be doing on Friday? And he said, what? I said, your funeral. And he just cracked up laughing. He said, well, look at me, here I am. See, God heals the sick. Do you understand? Palliative care, he just got up and walked out. He provides strength to the weak, he regards the aged, he rewards the diligent, he serves the unfortunate, and he sympathises and he saves. His reign is righteous, his promises are sure, his goodness is limitless, his light is matchless. You and I are children of the light. His grace is sufficient, his love never changes, his mercy is everlasting, his word is enough, his yoke is easy and his burden is light. He is, the next one, boys, please. That's it. He's indescribable. We can only try and describe him from a human perspective, but if we get up there and ask the angels, they'll add to what he is. He's incomprehensible, and that's my big bugaboo in Isaiah 9, because he's called Wonderful Counselor. And you know what I am? I get ticked off about that. He is wonderful, counselor. He is not a wonderful counselor, because that gives breath to him being a not so good counsellor. Do you understand? That's the stupid thing. So I got this book, and it's got a comma in it, all right? It's got a comma in it, and it's wrong. And the good old King JV, it's got a comma, because he's incomprehensible. You cannot comprehend the might that is within this person, Jesus Christ. He's irresistible, he's invincible. The heaven of the heavens cannot contain him. Man cannot explain him. See, the Pharisees couldn't stand him and learned that they couldn't stop him. Pilate couldn't find any fault with him. Do you know, if you've read the Gospels very carefully, 7 times Pilate tried to set Jesus free. Do you understand? Because he couldn't find any fault in him that deserved execution. And the witnesses couldn't agree against him because they were all liars. Herod couldn't kill him. Death couldn't handle him, and the grave couldn't hold him. And he has always been and always will be. He had no predecessor and he will have no successor. You can't impeach him and he isn't going to resign. His name is above every name, that the name of Yeshua every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. He is the kingdom, the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Amen. And John and I were talking about putting together these screenshots. And he was very gracious, and he just about cooked his printer last night. So he has printed off several copies of exactly what I've shown you. And they're a brilliant tool for evangelism. Do you understand? If you memorise even half of that, you're going to win people to Christ. So they're going to be up here, and you're all, anyone who wants to take these and take them home, they're an incredible resource if you want to get out in amongst the church. And there's just a few, two left. The Selah moments. In chapter 1, Ruth didn't even know that Boaz existed. So the Gentile people outside ancient Israel didn't know what a Messiah was. In chapter 2, Ruth is brought into the land of Israel as a poor labourer, gleaning in the field of Boaz and receiving his gifts. To her, Boaz is only a mighty man of wealth who shows kindness to her. That's what some people preach Jesus to the unsaved, that, you know, there's all of this benevolence if you just believe in him. The turning point is in chapter 3, where Ruth yields herself at the feet of Boaz and believes his promises. And the result is that in chapter 4, Ruth is no longer a poor gleaner, for now she has Boaz, and everything he owns belongs to her. And that means she is a co-heir along with Jesus in the inheritance that God the Father will give to Jesus. And I can't believe it. And in order, now this is what Ruth is all about. In order to bring Ruth, the Gentile, to Naomi, the Jew, Naomi had to be exiled from the land, and that happened in 135 AD when Emperor Hadrian got sick and tired of all of these revolts in Israel, and he emptied the land of every Jew in 135 AD and ploughed Jerusalem under the soil. And so Naomi was out in the Gentile world, and that's how they got to meet Jews and their Saviour. What law could not do, grace did. Ruth does not replace Naomi. Ruth learns of Boaz's way through Naomi. So the church doesn't replace Israel, and the Gentiles learn of the Messiah's ways through Israel. Naomi meets Boaz through Ruth because she started gleaning in his field, and Naomi didn't even know about that. No matter how much Boaz loved Ruth, he had to await her move. You had to believe and put your trust in Jesus Christ. Then he saves you. Do you understand? You don't get saved without believing on him. And that's the thing that happened in chapter 3. And Boaz, not Ruth, controls the nearer kinsman. He controls the Mosaic law. And the result is recorded in chapter 4. Ruth, the church, is no longer a poorer gleaner, for now the church has Boaz, and everything he owns belongs to us. Can you believe that? I can't. Because if you imagine what everything the Father's going to give to the Son, he gives everything to him. And we are co-heirs in Romans 8, and I might do Romans 8 next time. Anyway, that's it. And for I think there are 15 or 20 copies up here. If we run out, we can bring some more next week. But that is an amazing evangelistic tool. Father, we just come before you now. And Father, I have been so close so often to feeling the incomprehensibility of Jesus and what he's done for me in my life and for my children who now believe. And we're hammering our grandkids the same way. So Father, I can't thank you enough. There's no words that I can say to thank you for everything that you have done all the way through my life, even when I wasn't a believer, Father. So we just pray, I just pray now that everyone here, I pray that you really, really, really get to know Jesus personally. And that when we meet him face to face, there will be no surprises. We will know him as all of his attributes we've looked at today. And Father, I just thank you for the grace and the mercy that you've shown me, the grace and the mercy for everyone in this congregation today, Father, that you are going to bring us up very soon when you tell your son to go get your bride. And we will be in heaven with you until we return in the millennial kingdom, Father, and then we'll be in the eternal state in your presence, Father. And even then, that's incomprehensible to me, Father. So I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you've done for me, for my wife, for my kids, and for the people in this room, Father. And all God's people said,